Anubis. What is up, alienARMy? I am Oculus, the alien next door, purveyor of esoteric lore. And on this channel, we discuss everything out of this world. So today's topic, we are talking about a few different things, but as conveyed to me, everything is all motherfucking connected. So let's get started. If you saw my video about channeling, you will know that I was talking about me attempting to make contact with the Egyptian god Anubis and how
he just didn't want to talk to me at that time.
But guess what happened? Obviously, since I'm sitting here filming this video today, we know that he came through. I just want to let you all know that the channeled message that I received from Anubis came through as in like a channeled quote, which I just put into my fucking voice notes, and then here we go. So I will be reading the channeled quotes from Anubis. It is not necessarily the way that I channeled Sobek, which is like he pops in, he's like, hey, what's up? You know, it isn't like that. And the reason why I know that Anubis actually presented himself to me is because I made that video about channeling, and Sobek, thank you Sobek, he put in a good word for me because Anubis,
he's not a trusting ass motherfucker.
And we are going to explore his energy, and then I'm going to explain why, because what he is representative of. So thank you Anubis for allowing me to channel some things. Thank you Sobek for putting in a good word with Anubis for me. That's what I just want to say before I begin this video. So I channeled the quotes, and then Anubis, his energy, it's like I knew what he meant by it, but it was sort of like if I had any further questions, I had to go and like deep dive and figure it out for myself. Whereas Sobek is more just like he would let me know something, and then I'll ask him a question, and then it'll be answered. It was like Anubis, the way he came through for me, at least at this point, he was just giving me a channeled message, and then I would understand it for myself and interpret it, and then he would present to me another channeled message. So he came through, I channeled him, but it wasn't like we were having a conversation the way that I've had conversation with Sobek and a few other beings who I have channeled. Now I don't know if that is going to change. It probably will as Anubis starts trusting me more and more, but for now this is what we have. So we are going to be exploring, as I said, a whole multitude of different topics, and as always, this is the message that is conveyed to me, the messages that resonate with me, that I know as my truth from the way that I understand it as per the channeled messages that come through for me. So thank you Anubis, thank you Sobek for putting in a good word. But as always
fucking do what resonates with you.
If it don't make sense, do not consent.
Always do you, boo.
So with all of that being said, let's get into what Anubis relayed to me. Anubis, the guardian, gatekeeper of the transformation from 3D consciousness to Christ consciousness. The guard dog. He is guarded and he guards as well. Taboo is simply a perversion of the innocence. That something twisted, darker, and more sinister could be lurking behind the veil of that sweet innocence. Yet as the duality of the third dimension indicates, there is always a pole. That is why we have the sacred T. T, which end of the pole would you like to move towards? Which end of the pole would you like to stray away from? Remaining neutral in the center as the pole that is holding up the T is the ultimate sovereignty. Or if you want to look at the T upside down, it is the pole where the unification
of both the light and the dark move upward. This is the T inverted. Unification of the poles. Unification of the poles. Unification of the poles. Betwixt life and death, rebirth, the cycle of the ages. Anubis.
So if we want to think of Anubis in connection with the other topics that I'm going to mention here, this is how that message came through. Anubis is comparable to, as purported in the Bible, the archangel Uriel, who holds the flaming sword, and he is the guardian to the gates of heaven, and so that not just any motherfucker can enter. We have that comparable to the ancient Egyptian lore of Anubis, now filtering on over thousands of years later into the Bible story with Archangel Uriel, who is basically doing almost the same type of deal. He's guarding the entrance to the next phase of one's experience. Anubis is also comparable to Hades from the ancient Greek, as well as Pluto, which equates to Hades from the ancient Rome. Pluto, as we know astrologically, is the planet that governs Scorpio. Scorpio is the sign that governs the 8th house. And as we explore into this further, we are going to see how they are all connected. So I always talk about tiers, well, maybe not always, but
Quite a few times I recall.
me motherfucking talking about different tiers. So if we want to think of Anubis as like the great granddaddy, then we have Hades, Pluto, which are the same thing. It's just one is Greek, one is Roman. And then we have under that, we have Scorpio. And then under that, we have 8th house in astrology and matters relating to the 8th house. This is why I was talking about the letter T, taboo, letter T as conveyed to me by Anubis. As Anubis let me know, no matter how we look at the letter T has an interesting message. Right side up or upside down, they are both accurate in formation. And specifically when I was channeling, I wrote it as two separate words, in and then formation, because in formation of something, as in something is forming something else, but we can also take a look at the word information as presenting information to the seeker. So a little interesting snippet there. If we want to continue on to also the meaning of the letter T as conveyed to me by Anubis, the T on the T. So some fun facts about the letter T is that it is the 20th letter of the alphabet. 2020, clear vision, 2020, T also from the archaic means mark, as in a place that you mark something, or it can be simply a mark like a sigil. We also have the golf tee, which if we want to think about it, you tee off, you start from swinging at the T to which direction you want the ball to flow to. And we also have T stemming,
At least symbolically, in terms of like the actual fucking symbol,
from the letter X. Remember, I just said mark, it means mark. X marks the spot, but it was changed to look like the letter T like this instead of like this, just so they could differentiate betwixt the letter X and the letter T. And something else interesting, as explained in my T example, Anubis kept letting me know that he is the crux. He is the crux. If we want to look at crux, we see that the letter X is also applicable there. So when was the letter T invented?
T in its modern lowercase form is found all over ancient Semitic inscriptions. By 1000 BC, the Phoenicians referred to it as Ta, meaning mark, with our current T sound. The Greeks named it Tau and added a cross stroke at the top to differentiate it from X.
The T is indicative of the two poles, rectifying at the center crux and then digging deeper, right down into the motherfucking heart of the matter. There is no limit to the depths that you can go in order to attain more knowledge and understanding of the poles, as in the rabbit hole never ends. There is always more to dig deeper and find and uncover in rectification of the poles. It is hidden as in occult knowledge.
occult literally fucking meaning hidden.
It is buried. It is underground. It is in the motherfucking crypt. So now that we took a look at the symbology of the T right side up, let's take a look at the symbology of the T upside down, which
I don't know if I can move my hands, but I think you get what the fuck I'm talking about, okay?
Anubis is the crux of the poles, which is why he represents the scales energy. Remember, he's carrying around those fucking pair of scales? One side with the heart, one side with the feather. May your heart be as light as a feather in order to enter the afterlife. Live as a god on earth in Christ consciousness while still residing in a physical motherfucking vessel. Observing at the same time both ends of the poles, the mundane and the magical, the innocence and the perversion, the good and the evil. If the T is upside down, then the unification of these poles has already been established. Now you have an even and durable stand on which to ground yourself upon in order to elevate upward. No limit.
Like many ancient Egyptian deities, Anubis assumed different roles in various contexts. Depicted as a protector of graves as early as the First Dynasty, Anubis was also an embalmer. By the Middle Kingdom, he was replaced by Osiris in his role as Lord of the Underworld. One of his prominent roles was as a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. He attended the weighing scale during the weighing of the heart, in which it was determined whether a soul would be allowed to enter the realm of the dead.
So is the underworld actually a metaphor for the hidden or occult symbolism? Because as I said, the word occult literally means hidden. Ain't nothing nefarious about that, although I suppose if something was hidden from sight and you had to dive deep to get to it, you might wonder exactly why the motherfuck it was buried in the first place. So when we want to think of the underworld in terms of Anubis, what he let me know is that the underworld, there's a whole other world called the underworld that lies underneath and is hidden from view from the mainstream, from the two eyes. It is only accessible with knowledge attained by digging deeper and utilizing the third eye. So this was something that was conveyed to me by Anubis, as he said, if we want,
because I always fucking do this.
If we want to think of Anubis and the guardian of the underworld, we can also think of this in terms of Anubis is actually allowing those who pass the test, those who have rectified the poles, those who live as gods on earth, because they can see the underworld, they can see both ends of the poles, the seen and the unseen at the same time, therefore rectifying any imbalance inside themselves that might have been going on from the ego vantage point. Now they have rectified that inside themselves, and they are viewing things as always duality, polarity, but they are the rectification, they are the crux of the T, which is why they are able to see into the underworld things that might be hidden in plain sight. And that is Anubis's job. He is the one that asks you, is your heart as light as a feather? Does anything weigh on your ego mind? Because nothing, I repeat, nothing weighs on your Christ consciousness, because when one is in the state of Christ consciousness, they understand that all that is and ever will be is simply just fucking unification of the poles. The good and the bad are the same thing, but a different motherfucking degree. And when the seeker figures that out for themselves, they are presented with Anubis, and Anubis, as a metaphor, he is guarding the afterlife because of his connection with the underworld. One has seen through the veil of the 3D realm, things that are in plain sight. They now see it, so they understand that the underworld and the overworld are the same thing, different degree. Their heart is as light as a feather, which loosely translated, at least conveyed to me, that simply means that you have no fear. There's no more fear left, because if someone is in that fear vibration, if they are viewing the underworld as something that is malicious or nefarious in nature, that is still a fear of things that might not be on the surface. But because it's not on the surface, it's not shown by the light of day. You have to go traipsing through the darkness to get to there to understand it. Because they are afraid to traipse in the darkness, their heart is not as light as a feather. Their heart might be pretty motherfucking heavy. That's why you have that cliche term that is tossed around on the third dimensional plane. That cliche term, it was weighing on someone's heart. Because guess what? If their heart was to be weighed and they are operating from only the ego mind, only the ego vantage point, their heart is going to be motherfucking heavy. It's not going to be light as air. It's not going to be light as a feather. And then that scale, whoop, that scale, that shit gonna look like a seesaw that you see in the fucking cartoon. And then it one side is so heavy that the other motherfucker on the other side goes flying off of it. So when someone is operating out of fear, typically they are not in a state where their heart is light, and therefore they have not passed the test to see is your heart as light as a feather in every moment. Anubis is like, motherfucker, you ain't crossing me today unless your heart is as light as a motherfucking feather. So when we're talking about underworld, this is just simply someone whose heart is as light as a feather because they recognize that everything is the same thing, different degree. The underworld, the hidden, the occult does not bother them because they understand that what is hidden underneath is the same thing, different degree of that which is presented for all to see by the light of day.
Fun fact, did you know that Anubis is known by his adornment of an Inuit fetish, which is actually an animal skin with a stuffed head that he was purported to wear, as depicted in ancient Egyptian scribes? This garment is associated with the ceremony of embalming performed in ancient Egypt in preparation for entry into the afterlife. And of course, there's the other connotation to the word fetish, the one most are familiar with. Fetish, a form of sexual desire in which gratification is linked to an abnormal degree to a particular object, item of clothing, part of the body, etc. Or an inanimate object worshipped for its supposed magical powers or because it is considered to be inhabited by a spirit. As we proceed along in our little adventure here, we'll explore further into how this particular word helped be the guide to the Pluto Scorpio 8th house connection in astrology, because it is notated that these placements astrologically are typically associated with fetishes, especially those of a sexual nature. And of course, a sacred garment adorned during the procedure of embalming may be likened to Pluto, Scorpio, and the 8th house as well, with their death and rebirth affiliation.
So if we want to take into terms the word fetish, now this is just something that I'm telling you, when Anubis wanted me to go on a deep motherfucking dive, I had no idea what the motherfucking fetish was. I was just like, whoa, I did not know that. Thank you, Anubis. But here you go, you learn something new every day, right? That's how we grow, that's how we fucking expand. If we want to take this into consideration, this is a big point that made me connect Anubis with that Plutonian, with that Scorpion, with that 8th house motherfucking energy, because a lot of times 8th house matters, things that are taboo, can oftentimes be considered fetishes. And because we also have that occult symbolism in there, like a magical piece that someone might think has magical powers, we also have the 8th house coming into play there as well, because 8th house is very, very much associated with occult knowledge and magic and sorcery and things of that nature.
Hades, the unseen, the wealthy one, the giver of wealth. This is indicative of the wealth of knowledge that is hidden below the surface. It is the unseen knowledge which the naked eyes are not trained to recognize. The wealth and the giver of wealth ascertains itself when you go digging for the knowledge that is unseen. You become the wealthy one.
So as I explained, the underworld metaphor is actually just really something that liberates one from the construct of the outer realm, the 3D realm experience. It allows the seeker to know and to observe that there is more to the 3D life than what is just presented at face value. And this in and of itself, when one recognizes that, automatically liberates the constructs of the human mind.
The Anubis and Hades-Pluto connection is because Anubis stands guardian. Before he allows you to enter the afterlife, he wants you to explore for yourself and dig deeper, just like Pluto wants you to dig deeper. This is indicative of digging deeper into the unseen on an emotional nature, because it governs a water sign. Pluto astrologically governs Scorpio. This is about the emotional depths of transformation that one must accrue in order to enter the afterlife, in order to die to who they were before on an emotional level, in order to complete a cycle, in order to enter the afterlife, or the kingdom of heaven, in which Anubis the gatekeeper, guards.
So how this correlates to Pluto, astrologically speaking, and also if we want to look at the mythology of it too, since this is all underworld type of things, this is really the inner transformation, because remember, Pluto does govern a fixed water sign and the 8th house. So we're talking about an emotional nature. We're talking about things that are going on beneath the surface inside the subconscious, because remember, subconscious is equating to water energy, at least as conveyed to me. Pluto, transformation of the underworld, bringing it out into the surface, making the hidden seen and recognized for what it is. Unification of the poles. You transform yourself, which is the power of Pluto in astrology in one's natal chart. Pluto is a generational planet, so if we want to think of him, he is very, very slow moving. He is the slowest moving planet in the astrological chart, and it really takes some time for him to make his revolution around the sun. If you want to just think of like the textbook definition of the solar system as purported in astrology.
Whether planets are real or not real, I mean,
this ain't the topic we're talking about today. But just strictly astrologically speaking, because Pluto is the governor of a fixed water sign, and as we said, well, as I said, the water element is governing the subconscious mind, so the emotions, right? If you're familiar with manifestation and if you watch things about the subconscious mind, you understand that a lot of times motherfuckers can manifest things that they do not want because of belief systems that are stored, that are running subconsciously underground beneath the surface inside the subconscious mind. So when we want to think of Pluto in terms of occultism and the subconscious mind and regeneration, this might take some time. Remember, fixed energy, you don't want to take your time on it. It's not something that you're going to want to rush necessarily, like cardinal water. It's not something that you might go over here for a little bit and then go over there for a little bit, like mutable water. This is fixed. This is putting your nose to the motherfucking grindstone.
however the fuck that phrase goes, I don't even fucking know.
And this is really aiming to revolutionize one's self in terms of their emotional psyche. Pluto is revolutionary. Pluto takes his time, but when he's done doing what he got to do, you best believe you gonna recognize what the fuck he changed. And because we're talking about the subconscious mind here with astrology, we understand that in order to truly make a beneficial change that the seeker wants to fucking happen, it might take some time, because you gotta go deep diving in there. You gotta dig deeper. You gotta have that tea, right? You gotta see the balance, the unification. Then you be like, okay, I'm stable because I rectified the T's. Now I'm gonna go deeper, because a lot of times 8th house matters and Pluto and things like that, it's topics, you know, T for taboo, that motherfuckers don't really want to deal with, or they don't know how to deal with, because they typically are kept hidden in plain sight, you know. So we'll get more into that as we progress along. This is something where you really need to have that control, that emotional control fixed, in order to dive deep into the area of Pluto and to really be the causation of the change that you wish to experience in the outer. But you have to start that causation from digging deeper within, inside that watery realm of the subconscious mind, occasionally perhaps looking at things and uncovering things that you don't really want to take a look at. So another thing with Pluto astrologically and Scorpio and 8th house matters is the taboo, which I touched on a little bit. So with these 8th house matters in regards to Pluto, what is happening here is that the topics typically associated with like 8th house and Scorpio and Pluto, they're not things that a lot of motherfuckers find easy to comprehend or to understand. Though they are aware consciously that these things exist, some subconsciously they might be like, woo woo, let me get away from this, right? Because it's considered taboo to talk about it. So the pole that I am just going to use as an example is the innocence and the perversion. That's why they say it doesn't matter what you look at, it matters what you see, because someone who is operating from innocence is going to see something entirely different than someone who has been a little corrupted, someone who's dared to traipse in the depths of the dark side. They're gonna see some perversion to it, but it's the same thing, a different degree. It was just perverted into something that is not considered mainstream. And that's pretty much what the word perverted means. It's taking away the innocence to something, at least as conveyed to me in regards to this metaphor. So something innocent might mean something entirely different to someone who has perverted the meaning. And I'm sure you could think of a lot of instances where perversions do occur, and someone might be aware of the perversion of that thing consciously, but they don't want to touch it, they don't want to deal with it. It's like they don't even want to go there, when in reality, when you are solid, when you are that T that has dug deeper and now you stabilize yourself to elevate higher, you don't care about looking at the perversion, and you're just like, okay, well, it could be this, but it could be that too, on the other end of the spectrum. So there are some things like, let's say, sex.
Here we go. Thanks, Anubis.
We have sex, right?
Maybe some don't. I don't fucking know.
If we want to look at sex, it's just sex, but it's a pole, okay? It's the same thing, different degree, but someone might, in an earthly vessel, look at sex as taboo, and they don't want to talk about it, and it's raunchy, and it can be freak nasty sometimes. Wherever the fuck your mind is going as to why you wouldn't want to talk about sex, I never had the talk with any fucking adult, okay? I believe they tried to teach that at the indoctrination camp. It was really fucking funny. Why do people laugh at that, right? Because it's like weird. It's like, whoa, we're talking about this. Either which way, does anyone really want to fucking talk about sex in the context of someone explaining to you intellectually what sex is all about?
Do you really want to talk about it? I mean, I don't know.
But at the other end of the spectrum, at the other side of the pole, we have sex in order to...
Some people do, some people don't.
Humanoids in the animal kingdom have sex sometimes to continue the species, right? They do it to procreate. So it's sort of like it's taboo to talk about something that is, if you want it to go that way, procreate and reproduce the population, which is like, if motherfuckers weren't having sex, then I don't know who the fuck would be here. I mean, maybe we would, I don't know. I'd probably beam down in a fucking spaceship in a lightning bolt like War of the Worlds. Who the fuck knows? Either which way, right? We have that taboo topic, which is sex, which is like everyone's pretty much fucking doing it, but are they talking about it?
I mean, you're probably talking about it with the person you're fucking doing it with.
But you're not gonna wanna sit down and have a conversation with the elders around you when you're fucking 12, and then they're gonna try to tell you some weird shit, right? But it's like, you as a 12-year-old would not have even been in the vessel if motherfuckers didn't have sex at some point, right? So it's sort of like, well, that's how the species reproduces to survive. So it's sort of like that angle. And I just use it as an example because 8th house Scorpio, that is the house of sex and things like that. So I just use that as an example, but there's a taboo connotation that can be associated with it. But there's also that animal type of reproductive aspect, which is scientific, which really shouldn't cause anyone to fucking blush or giggle because it's fucking science.
Allegedly, who knows anymore?
But that's what it is. So it's like, are you looking at sex as this way, as taboo, not to be talked about it, or are you looking at it as something that is natural, just like waking up in the morning and needing to hydrate your physical vessel and nourish it with food, right? That's natural, but food and water is not considered taboo, even though that's a natural part of inhabiting a humanoid vessel. But sex is the one where it's like oh, like why are we talking about that, you know? So one example there.
I give myself props for talking about it.
Obviously, I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks, because I wouldn't be making videos on YouTube for motherfuckers to see if I gave a fuck. So there you go.
To enter the afterlife, the kingdom of heaven, prove yourself worthy. Observant energy, the underworld, hidden underneath the world you know. You had to dig deeper to understand the esoteric, occult, or hidden meaning that lies beyond the illusion of the third dimensional plane, which essentially will take you higher. Your old self is reborn, transformed. Now, the old you is dead. The new you, the enlightened you, is born. Born again, perhaps. A rebirth, a regeneration of the soul. Living again in the afterlife. Passing through the gates of heaven. Your heart shall be as light as a feather.
So how Anubis came through with being, as conveyed to me, affiliated with the Scorpio energy is precisely because he carries the scales. The scales in astrology are associated with Libra energy, 7th house, and the next house,
Obviously.
which follows 7, is the 8th house, which is the house of Scorpio. Now we're going from cardinal, the ambition to actually think about things and maintain neutrality with the scales. We are transitioning, right, from one plane of consciousness where we neutralized ourselves. Now we're moving to the next area to remain steadfast in the balance of the poles in order for us to explore our psyche deeper, which is 8th house. Anubis is holding the scales because he's already been presented with 7th house matters. He already understands it. That's why he is guarding the 8th house. He's like,
You sure you motherfuckers want to creep around in here? This shit about to get dirty.
some shit like that. So this is the energy that Anubis was conveying to me, because one must be really mentally sound and balanced within themselves, which is why we have cardinal air, 7th house. You're balanced, you're harmonized in order to traipse around inside the 8th house, because as we just discussed, there's a lot of freakish shit in there. Why this is associated with the sign of Scorpio is because Anubis has already, Anubis is a god, I haven't heard this anywhere, by the way. This is just what he's telling me. So God, he's essentially limitless. But why he presented himself to me as being representative of 8th house energy and not 7th house is really because he's mastered. He's holding the scales. Like, he's larger than the scales. So what he's doing is he wants to help a motherfucker to elevate, but first he has to know that they have dug deeper with that fixed water in the 8th house. They've really rectified any taboos that might have been going on within themselves, and now once they have done that, they are having their heart as light as a feather, and he is the guardian. He is the guardian of this type of energy where one has traversed from the egoistic mind, balanced within themselves the poles, and now they are ready to access the higher knowledge, the kingdom of heaven, the afterlife, after they've traipsed through the underworld. He is the guard, which is why he's the head of the jackal, because he is essentially a canine. He is a guard dog. He is a watchdog. That is why I associate it with Scorpio energy, because that energy is fixed of water. Ain't nothing gonna easily go inside there, right? Ain't nothing gonna easily bypass any type of fixed. So with fixed water, it's representative of allowing only those that are deemed worthy into the realm of the 8th house. Anubis wants to be that guard dog. He wants to be guarded. So this with Scorpio energy is someone who is very, very guarded with their emotional nature, because remember, water, subconscious mind. So that's the connection that Anubis relayed to me. It's like the guard dog, and he he conveyed to me that if you want to think of like the closest dog to Anubis, it would be a Doberman Pinscher, simply because they were trained as watchdogs. This is all about Scorpio energy. It's more about watching, being observant, rather than displaying what's inside the emotions because of that fixed nature. It's more like observing and be like, do you really want to enter this area? Have you found balance within yourself before I let you in? And that's a very, very Scorpio quality. It also has to do with being guarded with one's own emotions, with one's own psyche. So Scorpio energy in astrology is aware, right? Remember, fixed 8th house shit, you're aware that it's going on, but you might not want to present that to the outside unless or until you have dug deeper in that area to figure it out and to harmonize the rectification of the poles within yourself. So this is energy that is likely to do a lot of self-reflection, like internal, psychologically analyzing themselves, simply because it doesn't want outside interference because it is guarded. But at the same time, it also wants to dig deeper because of the fixed nature. It wants to get to the root of where the fuck whatever type of thing that's going on in the subconscious mind, it wants to know how the fuck it got there. It wants to do its own inner self-exploration rather than letting an outsider cross the threshold, which is basically the energy of Anubis. Anubis standing there guarded, not letting a motherfucker through unless they meet certain qualifications. In Anubis's case, we already said the heart is light as a feather, but with Scorpio energy, it could just be whatever the fuck they deem is safe for them to let near them on an emotional level, because remember, we're still dealing with a water sign and it's fixed. So this is someone who is closed off emotionally from the outside until they have really deemed someone worthy to see the inner, and until they have understood themselves in that area on an emotional level before bringing it out into the surface.
The 8th house of astrology is the discovery of the taboo aspects of the emotional psyche, which many times are kept very well hidden. This is where the skeletons in the closet might typically be found, because the 8th house is indicative of something that is remaining firm and locked in place. This is because of its correspondence to the fixed water element. 8th house matters are likely to be found extreme, almost like a psychological addiction to the native, which is why they are likely to be kept private, hidden, waiting patiently to be unveiled into the light of day.
So matters with the 8th house, I mean, there's a whole lot of shit in here. We have addiction, sex, death, rebirth, resurrection, transformation, other people's money, maybe money that came to be acquired in a taboo way. All things like that have to do with the 8th house. So in the 8th house of astrology, if we want to filter down from great granddaddy Anubis, then we went to Hades and Pluto, then we went to Scorpio, now we have arrived at the 8th house. So this area in the chart is going to be an area which has all of the above qualities, very guarded nature, the 8th house, but the 8th house is also going to cover all of the motherfucking topics that I just mentioned. The area in the chart where you are likely to want to deep dive into before you let others in on what's emotionally going on with you, it's very, very likely to be your 8th house, no matter what planets are in there, no matter what your 8th house is governed by an astrological sign. So let's say if you even have 8th house Aries, it's not Scorpio 8th house, but the matters of the 8th house, which I just mentioned, sex, death, other people's money, shit like that, is going to be approached more in an Aries fashion. So that is likely how the seeker is going to deep dive into their own emotions of what's going on in their 8th house, but only they are going to deep dive in there with the suit of, let's say, Aries on, or Cancer on, or Aquarius on. Whichever sign governs your 8th house, that is the way that you are going to find ease and comfort in the exploration of these 8th house matters.
One often thinks of the 12th house as being the holder of the secrets of the psyche, aka the house of hidden enemies. One can traipse into and out of that house whensoever they please, as this house is representative of mutable water. There is no block here, there is no barricade, there is no fixed nature like that of the 8th. Even though, whilst maneuvering about through the 12th house, one may not yet see for themselves what exactly is going on in there. The 8th house is totally different. This is a secret that the native is aware of, but because they feel that it is perverted or taboo, they keep it tucked away, hidden inside of their emotional psyche. They do not allow it to see the light of day, but they are very much aware of it lurking in the depths, unlike matters of the 12th house, which may remain hidden to the native.
So with all of this being said, I am just going to use the metaphor that came to me. If we want to think of the difference betwixt the 8th house and the 12th house, as I mentioned, the 12th house, things might be hidden from view from the native, whereas the 8th house, they are aware that it's going on, but they choose to ignore it or not address it. But they might bring about those 8th house matters in lewd ways. Remember, we have the pole, innocence and perversion. This is what it is. But if the 8th house is really ignored and neglected, and the rectification of the poles of the innocence and the taboo is not attained and neutralized within the self, then those matters of the 8th house, they are consciously aware that they're going on, but they just don't want to look at them. Remember, right? It's like hidden. Oh no, I don't want to look at that. You don't even want to deep dive into it sometimes. That, as conveyed to me as per this channel, this is just an example I was shown, and I'm not saying all, but this is really resonating with me, so I'm going to mention it, is the serial killer type of energy. Because if we want to think of a typical serial killer, and I'm sure you could, pick one, there's a lot out there, but if you listen to the backstory of the serial killer, what they have done all their life until they started being a serial motherfucking killer, they have suppressed the urges that they had going on within their psyche, and they conducted their affairs nefariously, typically at night, because they felt more comfortable lurking around in the shadows of the night, because that's the only place that they felt comfortable even expressing those needs. They knew,
a good majority of serial killers, if you listen to them,
they knew that they had those urges going on. They were aware of it. It wasn't like 12th house where a motherfucker be oblivious to everything at certain stages in their journey. The 8th house, it ain't like that. Remember, the 8th house, that Scorpio energy is observant. So it knows those urges are motherfucking there, but they're just being swept under the rug, but not really, because they have to find an outlet, because they're looking at those urges, but at the same time they're suppressing them. So they're consciously aware, but they just don't know how to act out or neutralize those urges in themselves by daylight. daylight. So they want to go about it in like a clandestine manner. And I'm not saying that this is for all serial killers. I'm not excusing the behavior of serial killers. This is just the example that I was shown, and I feel like it's very fitting for 8th house matters. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who has whatever the fuck going on in their 8th house is going to be a serial killer or not. I'm just saying like the metaphor that I can liken the 8th house to, if those matters pertaining to 8th house are not addressed and brought to the light of day, even if it's only within oneself, then they gonna go haywire because they're gonna be suppressed. Because remember, it's fixed, so it's like bubbling and bubbling, right? And then boom, it's gonna explode. But it's going to, because 8th house energy is also cunning, it's not gonna be an explosion like fucking maybe 4th house with that cardinal energy. It's gonna be carried out, organized and methodically, and most likely by the light of the moon, or on a night that there's no moonlight or something. You know what the fuck I'm talking about, right? It's not going to be carried out in the light of day because they feel that it is taboo to even look at those things that they are suppressing. It wants to get out, that energy wants to get out, but the native just does not feel comfortable to let it out in the light of day, so they have to go about it in a shady manner. So it's always important to, even if there's some shit going on within your psyche, whether it's in your 8th house or not, remember 8th house energy, don't discriminate. I mean, it goes on within everyone, right? Everyone has a fucking 8th house in their astrological chart. But if there are things going on in your psyche, it's also a metaphor what I'm using for the psyche that you're aware of, but you kind of don't want to look at it, you know what I'm saying? If they're not addressed, they can come out in ways where you might not necessarily want them to come out, but it might feel also that you have no choice but to express those urges in that way, because we have Pluto associated with obsession and addiction. So if those energies are not expressed in a healthful way, then it can become an obsession, or it can become an addiction from an emotional level, and then chaos might ensue from there. It might be too much of a strain to keep hiding that, and then it just fuels the need to control it even more, because 8th house is about control as well. So you want to make sure that you neutralize the fucking scales, and then you deep dive into whatever area of your subconscious that you know is going on in there. If there is anything going on in there that you might feel uncomfortable to look at, to bring to the light of day, but if you don't, then it might become an addiction or an obsession. So the verdict of the scales is essentially liberating one's own secrets from their own psyche, the secrets that one might keep hidden or well guarded within themselves. The 8th house can actually set them free to be reborn again, to be resurrected, if they choose to address whatever undercurrents are flowing within them that they are aware of, but they just might not want to address it. It might be a little bit uncomfortable in the moment when you first start looking at them and you first start dissecting your own emotions, like wondering why the fuck you felt that way. Go on a deep dive, but it is going to emancipate the self from the old version, from the program, that subconscious mind program that was going on in the background, in order to really present the light as a feather heart to Anubis, in order to step into the afterlife, into the new version of you, which is not bound, which is not constrained by the constructs of 8th house energy. So a truly sovereign being continually sheds the old version of themselves. That's why we have Scorpio, representative of the phoenix rising from the ashes. They shed the old version of themselves constantly in the moment, maneuvering about their physical realm experience, moment to moment, continually shedding, continually shedding, continually shedding, remaining in that true neutral of the Christ consciousness. Anubis is like, okay, homie, I got you. I'm gonna allow you entry into the afterlife now. And that's what happens. Thank you, Anubis. Thank you, Sobek, for putting in a good word for me with Anubis. I am Oculus, the alien next door. We will chit chat again soon.